Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Made for More video series. I'm your host Jade Stoner, and in this mini-series, along with my guests, we're going to be getting into some of the things that are really going to help you to elevate your life from the inside out so that you can create the life that you really, really want and the one that your soul is calling you to, and not just live the life that you settled for. Today, I'm joined by the amazing Sam Flynn, who is a digital wellbeing coach. And she works with individuals and businesses to manage their relationship with the digital world to promote positive use rather than causing a negative impact on their lives. So I'm excited to get into all of that. And I love that Sam has a background in business psychology, which she brings into her work along with her own life experiences. And when you add all of that together, I think that's really powerful. So welcome, Sam.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
So digital wellbeing coach. Sounds amazing. What does it mean?
Yeah, well, I think it's quite a new concept, really, and one that obviously didn't really exist kind of 10 years ago. But as the use of digital solutions has astronomically grown and obviously has become part of all our lives, pretty much constantly throughout our day, sadly, unfortunately, there is a downside to that as well. So as a digital wellbeing coach, I help people manage their relationship with the digital world so that it's a positive relationship rather than negative. It's not about, deciding that that's it. I'm going to throw my smartphone in the bin. I'm going to delete all social media and never go near it. I'm going to go off grid. It's not about that. It's about realizing that it's part of our lives. So how can we manage that effectively to keep it positive and reduce the negative impacts that that might bring?
Yeah, so negative impacts, I'm thinking, so in my work, I'm a spiritual life coach. I have shared on a podcast episode, actually, being mindful of what you're feeding yourself, because it affects us on a subconscious level as well as a conscious, and being mindful of like what's in your feed and, not jumping on your phone like first thing in the morning or last thing in the evening. So what are some of the negative effects that you've seen? Because I know that you've done a lot of research about all of this as well.
Yeah, so there are numerous negative effects, sadly, particularly that increase as use increases. So they are, first of all, time, actually losing time to devices. And I think everyone I know will say, I haven't got enough time. I've got no time. And, one thing they wish they had more of is time. Yeah, if they look at their screen time, chances are they have time. They're just giving it to something that's maybe not adding value and joy and fulfillment to their life, or giving them the time to do the things that they want to do in life. So time is definitely a big one, particularly, here in the UK, the average phone user is using their phone for 4 hours a day, which sounds that's okay. That's quite normal. You can imagine kind of at chunks through the day, how quickly you could get up to 4 hours. But if we kind of put that together over a year, that's 2 whole months of the year without sleep we're spending on our phone. So when you think of it like that and think, is this something I really want to be giving 2 months of my life to every year? For most people, the answer is not really. So time is definitely a big negative impact. Focus and attention. So our ability to focus on things, to pay attention, is definitely negatively impacted by the digital world. Creativity and our ability to kind of think freely and have ideas come to us is impacted. Sleep is definitely impacted. You mentioned there, like not looking at your phone last thing at night, yet so many people do, and it really negatively impacts their sleep. And then finally, mental health. You talked there about kind of managing your feed and making sure you're feeding yourselves the right kind of content that empowers you and lifts you up. But for a lot of people, actually, they're naturally drawn to, and we all are as humans, naturally drawn to things that actually leave us feeling angry or sad or negative in some way. And that can have a profound impact on our mental health, as well as all the other negative things I've mentioned there, things like sleep and losing time. All of that as well is going to really negatively impact our mental health as well. So there are definitely quite a lot of downsides, unfortunately, to the digital world.
Yeah, and I think for me in my work, I'm definitely like about getting people to actually think for themselves, like not just being sheep and not just getting dragged into all of this. And I see smartphones, most people are just getting dragged into it rather than consciously thinking about, okay, do I need to be on be on here? What am I getting out of this right now? Is what I'm seeing, is it empowering me? Is it disempowering me? Is it lifting up? Is it or bringing me down? I recently did a focus group, and one thing that really stuck out from one of the women that I was speaking to, she said she gets really anxious when she's on social media. And because I've come such a long way, and I encourage, you know, my audience and my people to do the same, and really editing and cultivating what their social media feed is like, and what they're feeling, it kind of brought me back for a minute. Like, oh, I forgot that people experience this, because I don't get caught up in that. I don't have people on my feed that say things like, you know, those people that like put out a cryptic post.
Yeah.
Or they're talking about someone, but you know intuitively exactly who they're talking about. Like, you don't need to mention the name. I just don't do all of that. So it was really, I kind of guess it brought me back down to earth, for want of a better way of putting it, of like, wow. And actually, you're aware of it as well, but not necessarily doing the things to mitigate it. So, I mean, if somebody came to you and said that, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, it is really, really common as well. I think, you know, people don't realize just how much control they could have over it rather than letting it control them. And I love the way that you say kind of the conscious use. That's something I talk about all the time. Conscious versus unconscious use, you know, just scrolling through feeds and accepting what we're seeing as being what the platform's delivering to us, rather than thinking, hang on, how can I make this something that I want to see, that fulfills me, that brings me joy into my life? So yeah, if someone in that situation where it's causing them anxiety, we would definitely take a step back and start looking at, right, what platforms are you using and who are you following and what kind of things are you seeing on there? I'd show them things like how to mute certain accounts so that you know, we've all got those people in our lives, don't we, that, you know, you can't necessarily unfriend them or stop following them, but we can mute them so we're not seeing their posts in our feed. We can tell the platforms, I don't want to see this. So we can kind of start to steer the platforms into understanding what we want to see. So I think, yeah, the first step is really that kind of shift into conscious use and being more aware of the impact it's having. I mean, someone who's kind of experiencing high anxiety from scrolling on social media, I would probably recommend initially a kind of a switch off period for a little bit. Sometimes that works better to then kind of go back into it with a different attitude than to try and go from constant high level use to kind of try and bring it down and manage it a bit. Sometimes that kind of breakaway can help them see that actually that is the issue, and we need to then address, okay, if you're going to go back onto the platforms, how can we do that in a way that makes it less anxious for you, that brings you feelings of joy and fulfillment as opposed to anxiety and sadness. We then look through who they're following, we look through how they can curate that feed and make it a more positive experience for them, because it's just mad, isn't it, that we would give ourselves so much time to something willingly and, you know, and spend so much time doing that to actually be left feeling not in a great way, to be left feeling anxious and to be left feeling low. So I think the really important thing is the bringing back that consciousness.
Yeah, and as I was hearing you describe, like, how if somebody was a high level user, you wouldn't advise they come off it straight away. To me, that sounded like you could have been talking about alcohol, you could have been talking about drugs, you could have been talking about any kind of addiction. And I guess that's what, for some people, that's what it is, right?
It really is. Yeah. I mean, they're designed to be addictive. Social media platforms are designed to be addictive. In fact, not just social media platforms, so many apps are designed with addiction in mind. You know, there's a lot of people on some of the world's biggest platforms. They have members of their team who are trained in addiction and how to make people addicted to something, because that's what they want. The more addicted someone is, the more time they spend on there, the more the platform can learn about them, the more they can deliver ads to that person that appeal to them, and the more that likely that person is to click on the ads and hence make the platform money. So it all comes back to money, really. So yeah, they have been designed that way. You know, there are so many different elements to it, such as, for example, the infinite scroll. There's no end point. There's no, oh, right, we've stopped, we've come to the end of the feed. It just carries on and on. There's now the algorithms that are delivering content to us that's highly relevant to us. So in the past, if we were going in chronological order, we would just see everything on our feed, but in a kind of the order that it was released. And then we would get to the end and go, oh, right, we're back to where we were the last time we looked at our feed. Now, because of algorithms, it's constantly feeding to us what we are telling it, what we're telling it we're interested in, what we're telling it we want to see. So that's a really big factor as well. And yeah, they are highly addictive. It all comes back to dopamine release in the brain, just like any other addiction. But the downside in some ways of social media addiction compared to others is that it follows us around. So it's always with us with our mobile phone. It's kind of unavoidable. And also it's free. You know, with a lot of addictions, there's kind of that need to make money to meet the addiction. Whereas with social media, there's no need for that. There's no like, oh gosh, I've run out of money now, so I'm going to have to go off it. I'm going to have to take time away because I haven't got the money to spend on that addiction. There's no monetary kind of need there. So it makes it even more difficult to break that addiction.
Wow. You reminded me, first of all, when you were saying about how when you get to the bottom of the scroll and it's like, there's nothing else for you to see, I've just remembered, oh yeah, that doesn't happen anymore. I didn't even realize that. And then I was also remembering I think it's called The Social Dilemma. It was on Netflix. I watched it with my son because, you know, me telling him to do something is, oh, it gets to the point, it's like, oh, it's just my mum. Here she goes again. But I wanted him to actually see, like, this is a real thing. I've been around personal growth since 2010. So I'm, for the most part, 90% of the time, I'm very conscious when I'm on any kind of social media. His brain hasn't developed to that point. He hasn't, you know, been exposed to the same level of growth that I have. And there's also his age. And my thing as well is, and you touched upon this earlier, you said like about creativity and shifting that. When you're relying basically on something outside of yourself, like a phone, like a social media platform, and you're placing that above your own thinking stuff, for the kind of work that I do and where my messaging is, my work is about you coming back to you, is about taking back your power, thinking for yourself, and learning to listen to your intuition and your gut, because all of the answers are within you. Your soul is always speaking to you. But when we're constantly on these devices, it shuts down a part of the brain and then become reliant on this thing, which actually now I'm saying it out loud, I'm thinking that's probably where the addiction could start. You know, you start to shut down your brain, then you're relying on this thing. And then, of course, you need this thing to function. So every minute you're picking up your phone and scrolling and doing whatever.
It's so true. And actually, so few people now know how to just be still and do nothing. And, you know, this was something when I really started looking into this, something that it really highlighted to me, actually, that I wasn't taking enough time away from consuming. You know, for example, when walking the dog, I'd always have earphones in listening to a podcast, thinking I was, you know, that was the intelligent thing to do, to kind of, oh, kill two birds with one stone, walk the dog and be taking in information at the same time. And when I started to look into it, I realized that I wasn't giving myself enough moments to be creative, to let my mind wander, to, as you say, have the answers come to you. And I stopped listening to podcasts walking the dog. And it was actually walking the dog one day that I remember coming home and saying to my husband, like, I think I can help other people out with this. You know, it went from being to like, oh, I'm really interested in this, and I've made dramatic changes to the way I use digital solutions, to actually, you know, this could be something that could be a career for me. And I think if I continued to kind of walk the dog with earphones in all the time, that would never have happened. I wouldn't be speaking to you. This wouldn't be part of my business. And yet, when I speak to people and I say, like, when are your moments to just sit and be still? Do you just sit with a coffee and not do anything else at the same time? Do you go for a walk without consuming? Are there moments in your day where you're not doing something or consuming mentally something? And for most people, they don't have those moments. And you're so right. Those are the moments where that creative part of your brain opens up, because it's not being flooded and overtaken by things being thrown at it. So yeah, it's massively important.
I love that you've shared that. That like sums up so much. And one of the things that I say is like, the universe is always speaking to you. The question is, are you listening? And you just described that, you know, you're walking. And I often encourage people to go out for a walk and just be. And it's those moments, and I get them myself, that I call them divine downloads. Like when you're walking through the park and it's just like, poof, and you're like, wow, it's like a whole epiphany. People get them in the shower. And I'm sure there's something to do with the water that helps. But it's also because most people aren't doing anything in the shower other than just being.
It's exactly that, yeah. How often during the day do you get to not be consuming? And the shower is like the perfect time, isn't it? Because you can't scroll when you're in the shower. You can't be doing something else at the same time. You're just stood there. And you're probably right, actually, the water probably makes that an even bigger effect.
Absolutely. And it's those moments when we create the space that we're able to hear the things that are trying to speak to us, the voices within. And, you know, some people believe in like spirit guides and angels and those kind of things, like those voices that are outside of you, but kind of a part of you. So I think that's really, really powerful. And I also wanted to pick up on, you said like you were always listening to podcasts. And I think there is a certain train of thought within personal development that's like, you know, you should do these things at this time. And I was very much like that. And I do think it's important to listen to podcasts and read books and do things. And it's also really important to create those moments of just nothingness to hear yourself. You know, you don't always have to be, as you said, killing two birds with one stone, but there is very much that attitude, which is kind of what was very much like when I first started in personal development, and we were told, you know, don't watch TV because, you know, we all have the same amount of hours in the day. And most people say they don't have time, but then they look and, you know, you spend 4 hours a night watching soaps, you know, stop doing that and do something else instead. So whilst that's valuable, but then that can be taken as in, well, any spare time, you know, when I'm walking the dog, when I'm bathing the kids, or when I'm washing up, or when I'm cleaning, or going for a walk, I must be doing these things. And I think it's about discernment. You know, there's a time for doing that and there's a time for not. And it's learning to listen to yourself again and know the difference between when to and not.
It's so true. And I'm a massive podcast fan. Don't get me wrong. You know, I haven't given up my podcast habit at all. I love listening to podcasts, but I've had to work out when is the best time for me to do that. And walking the dog was not it. So now I do it in the gym. So every morning in the gym, I'll listen to a podcast while I'm working out. But later in the day, I have my dog walk for half an hour where there's nothing but me and the dog and the sounds I can hear outside and whatever else it may be. And I worked out that that was the best balance for me, because the gym's busy, it's noisy anyway. It's not my creative space to be thinking. So that's an absolute fine time to kind of plug the earphones in and take on some information. Whereas a dog walk is a lot more quiet and still, and just a much bigger opportunity for me to actually open up that creative brain more.
So I'm aware we've talked a lot about like the negative sides of social, and there are many. I'm also thinking like from someone who has a business, from that perspective, and a lot of businesses are online these days, or people are starting online businesses. You know, how does that work? And I think you touched upon the word earlier, like consuming. I think there's a difference between consuming and creating, and kind of comes back to consciousness and, you know, why am I on here? So what are your thoughts around people that run businesses?
Yeah, well, I mean, my main career for 12 and a half years, I've been a social media trainer. You know, my whole career is based around helping businesses use social media to market themselves and to grow. And I'm a massive fan of that, and think that's an incredible opportunity that social media has provided for businesses. But there is a big but here. And I think the problem is when you're running a business and you're trying to get your name out there, sometimes people get all consumed with social media and they spend all day on it, and actually the time they're spending is not equivalent to the output they're getting and, you know, what it's doing for their business. So it is definitely still possible. And I myself promote my businesses on social media. I talk about reducing your phone use and all those kind of things on social media, because that's a prime audience for me. But things that definitely help: batch creating content. So it's not like every day you're going on and thinking, oh, what shall I put on here today? You can have it all ready to go, scheduled, and you've only had to think of it maybe one day a month. That definitely helps to kind of limit your constant logging in. Secondly, the use of a timer. I'm a massive fan of a timer. So I think engaging and having conversations on social media is hugely important for businesses in marketing themselves. But it can be easy to be like, right, I'm going to go on LinkedIn, I'm going to chat to a few people and comment on a few posts, and then like 2 hours has passed. So what I do is I set a timer, and I'll give myself 10 minutes to go and have as many conversations as I can fit into that 10 minutes. And I might even do, depending on how busy I am that day, I might even do another 10 minutes later in the day, but it's with a timer. And that timer going off, I always talk about points of friction, and that timer going off is like a point of friction. There's very few points of friction when it comes to our social media use. as we talked about before, it's kind of endless and no one ever kind of says like, enough now, you're done. So that timer is like your point of friction to say, there you go, you've spent your 10 minutes, hope you've used it wisely. Now it's time to crack on with the rest of your day and get some work done. So again, it is back to that conscious versus unconscious. I think we can't avoid social media as business owners. And I think, like I say, that the opportunity is too big to avoid, but it's about how can we do that in a way that means we can still grow our business. We can still do all the other things we need to do in our business, and just being more conscious of our use and not kind of telling ourselves, oh, I spent 8 hours on LinkedIn or Instagram today, but that's fine because it was work, you know, and I think that's too easy to do, isn't it?
Yeah, and actually, as I'm listening to you, I'm reflecting on my own usage online, and there's a little voice in me saying, and I'm thinking, I spend a lot of time in a Facebook group, but it's a particular Facebook group, which is part of a business membership that I'm a member of. So
Right.
it is conscious. And then I am aware sometimes I am just scrolling, but then my little voice pops up. It's like, Jade, stop. And I'm like, 3, 2, 1, right, we're out. And I was also thinking, so digital, yes, that is social media, but what about email? I know that email is a massive thing again for business. How do you promote that people deal with that in a healthy way?
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem with email, and I've had this conversation with so many businesses where they say the problem is we have to be plugged into our email all the time, because if a potential client emails and we don't answer straight away, we will lose that business. And that generally is completely false. It's just something they've told themselves, because if you're promoting your business in a way that should hopefully make people want to work with you, they're not going to decide, oh, you didn't reply to my email requesting to work with you within half an hour, so that's it, you've lost your chance, you know. And actually, you might have found this yourself. Sometimes I'll reply a few hours later and someone will say to me, thanks for getting back to me so quickly. So again, it shows that it's us that expects that we have to respond straight away. So we have to kind of remove that expectation that we should be responding to all emails straight away. And the other thing I think with that is it shows, if you are responding instantly, it makes it look like you're not that busy because you're just there straight on your email. So it doesn't reflect well in that way. But it also doesn't set the relationship up well if they begin to expect that you will respond to every email immediately. I recommend 2 or 3 times a day you can get away with checking your email. We don't need to be constantly plugged in. Turn off your email notifications so you're not aware the second an email comes in, and have set times in the day that are like your email check-in points. So it might be 10 a.m. And I always recommend not first thing, you know, the kind of opening up the laptop or computer, turning it on. And the first thing we do is look at our emails. I actually recommend that you spend the first hour doing the thing that's going to have the biggest impact on your business. And that's not checking emails. So 10 a.m., 1 p.m., 4 p.m., if you checked your emails just those 3 points through the day, you would find it much more manageable. You'd spend far less time on emails and no one would be waiting that long for a response. And I think that's the other side of it. If you're only kind of going every 3 hours and then it would be the next day, no one's waiting that long for a response anyway. So you're still kind of keeping on top of them. And the other thing I love to do on my emails is go offline. So for a lot of us, the information we need to do our job is in those emails, is in that communication we've had with people. So it can be frustrating if we go to our inbox to look up a previous email to see what was it I needed to do for that particular client, what information did they send me, and then you're bombarded with new emails. You can actually just take your inbox offline so that you're not receiving, but you are still able to go in and you're able to see what previous emails you've received. You're able to write emails so that when you go back online, those emails go out. And I find that is a much, much more manageable way than the constantly plugged in approach.
Yeah, and you said there, like the person that says, you know, I need to be on my emails. What I see in that is that's a limiting belief. Like that's just a story you're telling yourself. And I think people really need to look at the kind of stories you're telling yourself and then say, is that actually really true? And 9 times out of 10, it's not. It's just a story you believe. And then think about, if you believe it to be true, it's probably going to become true, because that's kind of like the basis of the law of attraction and some of the other laws of the universe. And your beliefs are a lot more powerful than you think. So this comes back to, you know, looking at yourself and looking inside of yourself and looking at, how am I co-creating these situations? Is that really true? Can I do things differently? And one of the things I was saying to one of my private clients recently was, you know, for those of us that have our own businesses, it's your business. Most of us didn't leave the corporate employed world to start a business, to have a job that we work even more hours. Like, it's your business. Design it and do it in a way that feels good for you. I also love that you've shared about setting the expectations in a relationship. Firstly, I laughed to myself as you said, people will think you don't have anything better to do if you answer really quickly. And I always remember Clueless, and Cher would be like, oh, no, you can't answer the phone. That they're called I Have a Life rings. And I think that's really funny. And it's also powerful. And what you're saying as well. And it's setting the expectations. For me as a coach, and I know lots of other coaches, when you're working with people privately, you do have to set those boundaries almost in place and set the expectations. And I also thought about, I know people that have jobs and they finish, I don't know, say they finish at 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, whatever. And then they're still slaves to their email and their work phone and the pings. And as you were saying, like about the pings and the notification, I completely forgot, because I don't have any notifications on my phone. The only thing I have is WhatsApp, because I learned a long time ago to switch them off, because that's what would make me very anxious, because you see just a sliver of something. That's all it takes, because you see like the first bit without seeing the full context. And then, as you said earlier, we have this negative bias. So our minds go to the worst case scenario. So then you're sitting there stewing over it. And then when you actually realize, you're like, oh, I just spent 3 hours or the whole night thinking the worst. And actually, it was just this. So I think there's a lot there. The thing about setting expectations, there even is that with being employed, and it's down to you to speak up, I believe, and say lovingly and respectfully, I finished at this time. I'm not checking emails after this time. I will check them here, because otherwise you find yourself eating into family time, and then that affects your quality of life. And there's such a knock-on effect with all of this stuff, like all of this digital stuff, if you're not careful, and it can have a negative impact.
It's totally true. And it is part of the work I do with businesses. This is all about creating that positive digital culture, because I like to remind businesses, let's go back 40 years. When someone left the workplace, they left the workplace. There was nothing they could do then. There was no way, there was barely any way to contact them other than ringing their home phone. There wasn't that kind of ability for them to be plugged in all the time. And now, obviously, particularly with hybrid working and people working from home, it's worse than ever, because there isn't necessarily that point where it's like, oh, the office is getting locked up for the day, you're going to have to get out of here. So actually, I could just sit and continue to work and get on top of everything and catch up. And maybe after I put the kids to bed, I'll log back in again and I'll check emails, I'll get ahead of myself and get ahead of emails for the next day. And it is awful for us mentally and physically and socially. But it's also actually really negatively impacting our workplace performance, because our downtime is our time to kind of recover. It's a bit like if someone went to the gym for 5 hours a day, every day on repeat, and never took rest time, their body would eventually just not operate anymore, which defeats the whole purpose. And that's so true as well in the workplace. If we're always plugged in, we're not taking that time to be ourselves, to relax, to replenish our stores and be ready for the next working day. And I think you're so right. It's really important as an employee to be able to go to your kind of your manager or whoever it is you need to speak to, HR, and say, I'm not prepared to be logging in out of hours. My contract says I finish at this time, and when I'm on holiday, I'm on holiday. So that's not what I'm comfortable doing. But there's also a big thing here on leaders. And a lot of leaders are overworked and will send emails out late at night or really early in the morning. That's a really negative tone across the organization then. Even if they say, I don't want you to reply at this time, I don't even want you to read it until you're back in the office the next day, it's actually setting the idea in place that to be a leader, you should be logging in out of hours. You should be, thinking about the business all the time. So there's a lot on leaders here to lead the way with this. And if they're seen to be logging off at 5 p.m, 6 p.m, whatever time the working day is over, and not doing anything until the next day, that sets a much better tone for the organization as a whole. So yeah, there's a lot of work there to be done in so many businesses. I speak to so many people who either themselves, or it might be a spouse or someone they know, who are just always plugged in, like they, might be sleeping next to their work phone and waking up in the morning and checking work emails before they've even got out of bed, or they're going on holiday and then spending an hour of every day just having a quick check-in on emails and responding to things. And it leads to digital burnout. Well, it leads to burnout in general, but it's the fact it's the digital solutions that have allowed it means it's full digital burnout, and it's not good at all for organizational success.
No, not for organizational success and not for individual success. It's very unhealthy. And the other thing that's just come to mind for me, I think a lot of people give so much of themselves to a job and to a career, but they forget. So this is more from an employee perspective. You give so much and you forget that your job is it's not a given. So what I mean by that is, I wasn't in this cycle when I was employed, but I was employed and I thought it was really safe, and I knew I wasn't happy there, but I thought it was really secure. I thought having a job was really secure until I was made redundant. And I was reminded that having a job can be very unsecure, because actually your livelihood, your power is almost in someone else's hands in respect to that job. So the reason that I share all of that is to point out, like, for those that are giving so much of themselves to a job, but then when your hours are cut or you're made redundant or whatever, if so much of your identity and your time is spent in here, and then that happens to you, you're then left with questions of like, who am I without this? You're then just left to face yourself and look at, who am I?
Yeah. Because you've not given yourself enough time to acknowledge that after being so plugged into someone else's world or a business world. Yeah, it's definitely. And another reason to have that switch off time and live your own life and spend time doing the things you love and not just being plugged into a job all the time. So important.
And not allowing that job, that career, that thing to be you taking all that extra pressure home, letting it deteriorate your relationships, whether that be with your partner or your children. And then again, when you decide to leave, or should your job come to an end in any other way, these relationships are destroyed because you gave all of this to your job, but then that's not there anymore. Like, what do they say? It's about remembering that you have a life. You're not just here to live to work.
Yeah, no, that's it. Yeah, you should be working to live rather than living to work.
That's the one. I was saying it and I was like, have I said it the right way around?
Yeah, that's it. If we're going and we're earning money, we should be spending that money on our lives and living our lives. And yeah, I think so many people have it the other way around, don't they? Where it's like, actually the life bit has kind of really lessened and the work bit's expanded. And then no matter how much money they earn, they haven't even got time to do anything with that money because they're so plugged in all the time. And it really addresses, why are we working in the first place? It's to live the lives we want to live. It's not to live to work.
Yeah, and they say culturally, like, those of us that are in the UK have the worst, and I think America as well. Europeans, or the rest of Europe, have it down. Like, they take siestas during the day and they have these days off and they do all this stuff. It's only, it's only certain cultures, as in countries, that do those things. And I was saying to a friend the other day, I was laughing to myself. And by the way, I just want to say that none of this is any shade to anybody who has a job. This is just about making you aware of your behaviors and your patterns and pulling back and tweaking whatever needs to be tweaked. So I was saying to my friend the other day, like, people that earn money in whatever way they earn money, like, put so much time to earn this money, they then get paid and then they spend their weekends finding ways to spend this money. And most people spend unconsciously, they just, oh, it's Saturday, let's go shopping. I used to be that person, by the way. You go shopping and you spend this money buying this stuff that you don't really want, or it doesn't really light you up. And again, I'm not saying don't spend money. I'm all for spending money, but spending money on things that make you feel really fucking good, and spending it in ways like maybe experiences and things, not just unconsciously, we're back there again, unconsciously buying for the sake of it. You work all these hours to earn this money and then spend all these hours spending it and go back into the cycle and then complain about it. Like, that's not what life is for.
It's not what life's for. And actually, when you were talking then, I was just thinking about the role that again, the kind of digital world is playing in that consumer society and that consumer culture of constantly bombarding us with, whether it's influencers saying, oh, you must have this latest eye cream or whatever, or, you know, throwing us fashion looks all the time. And also back to the kind of comparison syndrome as well, and going, oh my God, look at that person and how wonderful they're dressed. And I need to go shopping and buy clothes like that as well. And, you know, it's even been driven more and more at us, I think, to consume and to purchase and to buy, and not necessarily just to live and enjoy. So yeah, I think it's another way in which the digital world isn't helping us out and isn't helping us bring fulfillment to our life.
Oh, absolutely. I used to not really like online shopping because I liked it in that you could go to lots of shops kind of very close together, but you order your thing, you're not sure if the size fits you have to wait for it to be delivered, and if it doesn't, you send it back and all of the things. But actually, since 2020, because if you needed something, very much the best part of that year was online, my shopping habits have changed. So I actually do a lot more shopping online than I used to. And hearing you say that, and then you were saying about the influencers, and for me, again, it was like coming back to like that conscious thinking again. And I know we've used these words a lot today, and I just want to share for anyone that doesn't know, like, we have a conscious mind and an unconscious mind, and it's actually our unconscious that is on 24/7. It has zero chill. It sees, hears, and registers everything. And it's your subconscious mind that actually drives 95% of your behaviors and your life, and therefore is responsible for 95% of your results. So that's why it's really, really important to be aware of what's going in subconsciously, not just consciously. And you're absolutely right with the influencers. Like, we see these things, and again, I'm pretty well versed. Like, this is my career, this kind of stuff. Like, I should know better, reminding you that I am human. It doesn't exist, but I find myself doing it sometimes. And what I've found in the past, when I have, ended up on this bandwagon of this thing, and then I've bought it and tried it, 9 times out of 10, it's been an absolute piece of shit. Then I've had to remind myself of why I bought it. And then I remember, oh yeah, it's because I got caught up in the hype. And it's like, yeah, those were my lessons. But, just looking at things like, why are you wanting to buy something? Is it because it lights your soul up? Is it because it's something you genuinely want? Or is it because something that you think that you should have, because then you're going to be cool, you're going to be fit in, because then you can put it on your social media and say, hey, look at me. Like, if it's any of that kind of stuff, that's not the way to do it. The only reason you should buy something is because it makes you feel good, or because it provides a genuine need.
Yeah, absolutely. No, 100%. And, I think the whole thing around being conscious is so important, because it just shows how much we're being fed all the time that is really driving our decisions. And it's a major shift, isn't it, when you start to really consume that consciously rather than unconsciously.
Yeah, and then I was just thinking about cookies are something that have come out in the last couple of years. And I don't mean cookies like you can eat, and talk about the ones that track you and then they follow you around on the internet. And it's all part of the same thing. It comes back to what you said earlier, like how it's all wired and it's there to keep you online for longer and longer. And then I remembered about, have you seen the program about the Fire Festival?
Oh, I have, yeah. The disaster that was.
I'm laughing because it was so shocking. Like, the end result of it was so terrible. And then you think, like, how did you get away with this? And then you think about, like, again, it was that influencer thing. That's why a lot of people jumped on it. And it's like, there's so much of this. I'm now remembering Inventing Anna. I'm remembering Tinder Swindler. And I'm like,
it's opened up a new world, and
it's
that's not necessarily always a good thing.
No, it's not. And again, it's just, think for yourself, people. Like, I find with the Tinder Swindler, it's very easy to blame. We live in a very much blame culture society. And it's very easy to say, well, it's because he said and did this. But my thing is, like, again, bring it back to yourself. Let's take back your power. You really didn't feel anything. Like, I know that there was some part of you that was throwing out red flags and saying, this isn't right. And these are the things that we need to come back to and start thinking about. Like, we have our intuition for a reason. Like, that's our inner GPS. It knows what's up, and it's about learning to listen to it. And again, you know, coming back to everything we've shared in here, that's about turning off the outside noise, coming out of the digital world, unplugging, so you can learn to listen to the voice within. Like, all of this is connected, and there's so much of it. And, you know, we've only spoken about adults, like, let alone, you know, how all of this stuff impacts children.
I know, which is really, really tricky. I mean, I'm a mum of 3, and I'm dreading them joining social media platforms. I really am. But at the same time, I acknowledge that's the world they're growing up in, and that was different to the world I'm growing up in. And it doesn't mean that they have to completely avoid it. But as a parent, it's really important that I educate them in the right way, and, you know, make them aware of the negative side as well. Yeah. And just be a digital role model as a parent as well. I talk about that to a lot of people. You know, as parents, we can be really positive digital role models in how we use our digital technologies, how we put down our phone and listen and be present with our children, which I know is not always easy, because it's so easy to just sit there scrolling, thinking, oh, I can listen to them read their reading book to me at the same time as going on Instagram, or, you know, oh, I just need to check this recipe that I'm cooking while they're talking to me. But it's actually really important that we learn to kind of put all devices away when our children are trying to communicate with us, and just be that positive digital role model for them growing up as well, so that when it comes to them using smartphones or iPads or anything like that, that they can see the right way to do it and not become completely consumed in it.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I heard in there, it's like with the organizations, you were saying about the leadership being the beacon of light, almost like being that as parents. And that's so important. And, you know, that comes back to personal responsibility. One of the things that irritates me as a parent is people that use digital stuff as a babysitter for their children all the time. I don't mean every now and then, you know, because I've done it, we've all done it. There's a time and a place for it all. Like you say, we're in a different world, we're in a different time. But I think it's really important. And I loved what you were sharing when you were talking about the corporates, like going back old school a bit sometimes. Like you said, house phones, like, oh my gosh, like,
You know,
people have house phones, but then I actually want to put one back in my house, because I think my mobile stopped working or something, and it's a while ago for like a short period of time. And my son was at home, and it's like, how do you get in contact? No, or his phone wasn't working, some way around. It just made me think of a house phone. I think it's, yes, we've come a long way, and, you know, the digital world is amazing, and it's opened up so many doors and opportunities. And it's also really important to remember, like, the grassroots of stuff, like being present with your children, and when you're not listening to them. So what I see in my work is that a lot of the issues that come start in childhood. So a lot of it's from the age of 0 to 7. It can happen at any time, also up to like around the age of 15. But you know, for a child that doesn't feel seen or heard, what they internalize is then they're not important, they're not worthy, you know, they're not, their voice doesn't matter, their feelings don't matter. Because when I was younger and I was trying to tell mummy or daddy X, Y, or Z, they were distracted and over here, you know, scrolling through their phones. And I'm not really very important. And that causes issues in money, relationships, health, all of the things. So it's really important to be that present for your children. And like you say, it's like how they're interacting with the digital world.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hear so many parents who say, oh my gosh, you need to speak to my teenager, they're never off their phone. You know, I'm always like, put your phone away when I'm talking to you. And I do sometimes think, do you, when they're talking to you, do you put your phone away when they're talking to you? Do you keep your phone out of sight? Do you lie in bed scrolling on your phone but expect them not to? You know, so I think it is really important as parents that we think about how we're being that positive role model for our children.
I could hear, as you were saying, what do you do? I could hear, like, I would be told, do as I say, not do as I do. Like a very old school thing. It's like, that doesn't wash. It never did. But definitely not. You just have to be the example. What's the saying? Be the example that you want to see. Something like that.
Yeah, totally.
Amazing. So this episode is called How to Be Switched Off in a World That's Always Switched On. So as we close out, what do you want to share? Like, what are some great ways of switching off?
Yeah, so we covered one of them, and it's the one I always lead with, and it's turning off notifications, because it makes a huge amount of difference. So I definitely believe in turning off notifications. For the most part, you know, there might be, as you say, you keep WhatsApp on. I personally have WhatsApp notifications off as well, and I'll just check it a few points through the day. But yeah, that does make a real difference in your volume of use and being able to switch off. Also, having somewhere where like you leave your phone, so it's not something that kind of travels around the house with you, which is the case for so many people. You know, they'll leave one room holding their phone and take it to another room. Have somewhere that your phone just lives and it sits there. And if you want to look at it, you go to that place, you look at your phone and you put it down again. And that makes a huge difference as well, because then you can have that kind of switch off space. It's not, when it's next to us, we're more likely to just go ahead and pick it up and have a little scroll. So have it away from you, and think about those points of friction. How can you add points of friction to allow yourself to switch off more? So that is things like setting timers. Most mobile devices now have screen time alerts, so you can set up, for example, I only want to spend 20 minutes a day on social media, and then it will pop up and say, you know, your time limit is up. So those little points of friction really, really help as well. And then finally, one thing that I've often found is that people were like, okay, but if I'm putting my phone down more, I'm not as switched on. I don't really know what else to do because I'm so used to being switched on. I'm going to be bored. So I would write a list of all the things you love to do in your life that don't involve being plugged in. And every time you want to go for your phone, go to that list and pick something to do. So it might be stretching for 10 minutes. It might be going for a walk. It might be meditating, doing some exercise, playing a game with your child, whatever it might be. List all those things that you could be doing. Do that instead. And then ask yourself, after you've done that thing, do I feel better for doing that rather than for looking at my phone? And the answer will probably 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100 will be, yeah, I feel just so much more fulfilled in life.
I love that. And I can concur that turning notifications off on your phone is a game changer. I know people that have them on and their phone makes me like twitchy.
Yeah.
It's too noisy.
And I have the Apple Watch on as well. So the phone's going, the watch is going. It's like, how can you live with all these things going off?
Yeah, I'm like, I will never get an Apple Watch. I love Apple products. I have many of them, and Apple Watch is not. Yeah, the dinging on your phone, it's like, no, stop shouting at me.
It's exactly that, isn't it? It's like, oh, just give me some space.
I love using Do Not Disturb on my phone for my quiet periods of time. And you know, when you were saying like leave your phone in one place, I remembered somebody complained at me once because I didn't answer their phone call, and this would happen frequently. I'd be like, I don't have my phone in my hand all of the time. Like, my phone is there for my convenience, not for other people's. Like, I don't need to be there 24/7. But it reminded me again of like how many people are attached to their phone. It goes with them in the bathroom. It goes with them, you know, here, there, and everywhere, under their pillow. And I'm like, oh, like, that's a lot. So there are some great tips there. Thank you so much for sharing. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I think it's really, really needed in the world that we live in. And I love the work you're doing for that reason. Coaching has been a big part of my life for a really long time. So, you know, coaching in and of itself. And I love that you've, you know, put the digital and the well-being together into coaching, and that's what you do. So for all of you watching that would love to maybe work with Sam, find out some more about her work, whatever, I'm going to put all of her details in the caption to this video, so go check that out. I'll also put the links for Sam's website and all of the things. I just want to remind you before we close out that you are made for more, and all of this kind of stuff that we've been discussing here in this video chat is all things that are going to help you really tap into the true version of you and be able to create that more. You know, everything that you desire that's inside of you, it is available for you. It is there for you. You have to do the work to become a match for it. It's like the things that you want to hear, and you're here, and you have to do this, and then you get them. So yeah, switch off your phone. Be mindful of social media use. Go check out Sam. You know, you don't have to do any of this stuff alone. If it's something that you find challenging, or you think, oh, I don't know, even if it's giving you anxiety, just the thought of putting your phone down for a while, you probably need a digital wellbeing coach. So go check out Sam. Sam, again, thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate it. And I'm going to wrap this up, and I look forward to speaking to you very soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.